Well, welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and as you can tell, we are not in the normal garage because I've popped down to Gordon Murray Automotive for the first sight of the T50 supercar they're going to be producing and will reach customers in 2022. I've been really excited to see this car. I don't normally go out to manufacturers and see their first glimpse of these sort of cars, but this one I am going to make an exception for, and here it is. I walked in, the first thing that grabbed me was the one, how it was son of McLaren F1, and two, the size of it. It's sort of dinky. I looked up the size of it. I've got a crib sheet. There are so many numbers with this car, you need to know everything. 4,352 mil long, so just over 4 meters long. To put a reference point on that, the current Porsche 911, the 992, is 4,520 mil. So that's 200 mil shorter than the current 911. And yet it packs this incredible V12 that Cosworth are building, this 3.9 litre V12 that revs to 12,000 RPM. I'm going to show you some more details on this car. What I'm actually waiting for is Gordon Murray is due to arrive any minute, and he's going to give us a tour around. I'm wandering around in my socks because this being a show car, we can only get in it without shoes on. But I just can't wait to go into the details of this car and learn more about it. Now, Gordon, I can't get over the size of this car. You shrunk it to a size I didn't think was possible in today's age and crash legislation, etc.
Yeah.
How do you do that then?
Well, you know me, I think car design is packaging. I really do. I'm not talking styling, I'm talking the actual design of the car. You know, 20 years in Formula One teaches you how to shrink wrap.
Yes.
And the F1 was pretty good. This one, I think, we've got it just slightly better because it's virtually the same size as the F1, but the cabin's bigger. The luggage compartment's bigger. We've got 30 litres of interior stowage, and the V12, of course, and 3 grown-ups.
Yeah.
We've made the passenger seats just a little bit bigger, so the passengers are more comfortable, and we've got more cabin length.
I'm very lucky. I've already sat in this car, and we'll come to that in a moment. I think you're the only maker of this sort of car who even discusses luggage space in the first sentence. But that's what you want this car to be, isn't it?
No, that's it. I mean, that's it absolutely in a nutshell. You know, we did the F1 to be used, and thank goodness they did. When they were not worth 25 million, they were used a lot.
Yeah.
And this is the same, you know. It's a sort of hyper GT, which is what the F1 was. I don't do stiffly sprung cars. I don't do cars without luggage, you know. So I'm really hoping the customer profile so far points to the fact that people are going to use this again.
That's terrific. Oh, I think the giveaway for me, when I was just looking at the spec sheet before I saw it, size of the wheels.
Yes.
Normally they're 22 or something like this.
I know, I just don't.
19.
I have to say, there is no rubbish on this car before we even start. You know, everything on this motor car does something. And the 22-inch wheel thing is nonsense. You know, it's marketing and styling. It doesn't do anything for you. It counts against you on unsprung weight, on everything, ride quality. These wheels are the size. We've been working very closely with Michelin. These wheels are the size that they need to be for the car of this weight and with its downforce. So 235, 295, 19 and 20.
I think, well, wheel size is stretched because I hear that design, you've got to increase the volume of the car for the legislation, etc., and therefore you end up with a bigger wheel to fill the space almost, don't they? It's just, that's why the style is like.
I think this legislation thing, well, this proves it. This has got airbags, ESP, ABS, partial power steering, we'll come to that. It's got 85 litres of fuel, and it's this size, and it's got to pass all the crash tests and stuff. So I think it's easy to have an excuse.
Right.
Personally, I think the size increase is more of an inter-manufacturer competition where they keep saying that people want bigger cars, they want more space. And when they create more space, but they package inefficiently, the car gets bigger.
Well, not in this case. So we start, the other bit I couldn't get over is actually we just move round to the front, if you don't mind, Charlie. At the front, I can't get over, there's no aggression here. It's all very smooth. I thought aero demanded you control the air
Yes,
there.
that's absolutely true. And this has got more than double the downforce of the F1, because the F1, to be honest, had virtually nothing. It had just enough to keep it on the road, because we calculated that would do 235 miles an hour, and of course it goes up to the square of the speed. So you take a softly sprung car, and it does 235, 240 miles an hour as it happened. You're not going to have any wheel travel left. So we had to tune the F1 downforce back. This one, the enabler for us to keep the car clean without any splitters and holes and ducts and things, is the fan. So the fan makes the underbody work much more efficiently, which has been the enabler to do a beautiful car. We call this a return to beauty. You know, once again, there seems to be a competition at the moment to see how outrageous you can get. And you know me, I like, you know, balanced form, pure styling.
I'm staggered. It wasn't the look I expected when I first walked in. Just as we start at the front, so we have that. What's that feeding, that scoop there?
So the main holes in the front feed the water radiators for the engine. So that's similar to the F1.
Okay.
I've tried to disguise the ducting and integrate it into the design. These slots here are for the air conditioning and the heating under the lights. So we don't have to have a hole in the bonnet. The front brake cooling is underneath in the front diffusers.
There's quite a aggressive cutout, isn't there? The back of the wheel.
On the F1, because of the monocoque shape, I couldn't get enough air out of there, really. That's the exit for the water rats, but it's also relieving the high pressure in the wheel arch. And I couldn't quite get enough out. So this time, the carbon materials have moved on in 30 years, you know. So we've managed to skinny the monocoque down, lighten it up, but it's still twice the torsional stiffness. So I've managed to dive the monocoque in a lot more and get more exit, which is much better aerodynamically.
Wow. Little thing here, why is that a removable hatch? Is that
that's because that's a hinged hatch, front hinge hatch like the F1, and that's another stowage compartment, but it's for things like the washer bottle, the towing eye, your medical kit, all the stuff you have to have in the car, and of course the air comms in the front too. So it's a service for brake fluid, clutch fluid, washer bottle, that sort of stuff. So it is a stowage compartment, but it's not luggage. So.
Is there a titanium toolkit with this car?
There could be.
I wouldn't expect anything less. Just the air conditioning bit, I'm slightly jumping around because one thing that got me again about the engine spec, which is sitting over there, no belts, etc. So how do you do it with is the compressor in there? Is that electrically driven?
There were some things on the F1 that were just rubbish, absolute rubbish, from day one. The headlamps, for example. So this time, we've gone for a great headlamp manufacturer and done them from scratch. Not Helford units like we have on the F1. And the aircon didn't work at all on the F1, and that's because
now you tell us.
We had a belt-driven compressor, and to live at 8,000, it didn't do much at idle, which is when you need it. Plus the fact I couldn't package enough cabin exit air, and if you don't let the air out, it won't come in, basically. This time, we've got 500% more cabin exit air, and we've got a 48-bolt compressor driving the air conditioning. It's an air conditioning compressor. And
that's in there?
Yeah, and that's in here. So the aircon is completely independent of engine speed.
That's very clever.
I was also desperate to have an engine with no belt-driven stuff hanging off it. But they run very hot, these new LEDs. So that's what these slots are. And most people, there's a little fan. There's a little fan, and it recirculates. The air goes back underneath and round again. And most people put the heatsink on the return airflow underneath. But I just like the look of heat sinks, so I stuck it on top.
All this,
and integrate this gold thing is a heat sink.
And this is they're like running light, isn't it, around the outside? Is that what that is?
No, there's no I hate those.
Oh, don't you need them?
No, the daylight running is incorporated into these two. So the two lamps do everything.
Well, we just moved down the car, so carbon ceramic brakes, which you obviously wanted on the F1, weren't quite there, were they, at the time? Is this an aluminium wheel, or magnesium?
It's forged aluminium, and it's lighter, even though it's bigger, it's lighter than the 17-inch mags on the F1. That's just, there's a good example of technology moving forward. That's just analysis tools have come on so far in the last 30 years, you know. So the rim company we're working with, they even managed to mill the inside of the spokes to get another few hundred grams out. So
You weren't tempted with carbon fibre wheels then?
I'll never use carbon wheels.
You don't think it's a good
idea? I started composites in Formula 1 in 74, brakes in 76, carbon and chassis in 78, and the first road car. So I know a lot about composites, and it's just too dodgy.
Is it?
Yeah, the failure mode. These things, you can nick them, you can curb them, you can dig a tie lever in when you're changing, and you get a gouge. And if it does start failing, you get a slow crack propagation that you can pick up or see even.
Right.
Carbon fibre, if you notch carbon fibre, it has a catastrophic failure mode. So the last thing you want is on the wheel.
Right.
You know, something like a chassis is fine because you're not going to dig a hole in the chassis.
No.
But
interesting.
Yeah, and actually we beat our weight target on the wheels, and we're almost, I think we're within 800 grams of carbon fibre anyway.
Good Lord. Excellent. So then we've got the scoop obviously bringing the hot air away from the rads, the door scalped out.
Yep.
Very F1. I just look at that and I just think this is a modern take on F1, isn't it? Even the hinge seems to be in the same place.
You've got to let the air out at the side.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got it working much more efficiently on this one.
No wing mirrors as well?
It's going to have cameras. They're not on at the moment, but they don't increase the 1850 width.
Oh, right. Okay. Lovely script, your Gordon Murray design. I presume there's an indicator in there or
Yeah, that's the side repeater.
This one?
The little bit at the front is the side repeater.
Yeah. And the two-tone, is that on all of them? Is that how you're looking at how it's going to be?
Yes, because on the production cars, everything you see here that's black is actually carbon fibre.
Oh, okay.
Not overtly so. We've tinted it right down, so you have to get up really close to see it's not in-your-face carbon like Fablon stuff you see on cars these days.
Yeah.
But the reason why this show car, this is all black, is on the real car, that's carbon fibre.
Right. And the glass panel?
The glass panel is a no-cost option, and the reason it is it adds 2.2 kilos a side. Right. So I don't want to force that on anybody. So it does make the cabin, we did 3 lots of seating bucks, and it does make the cabin feel a lot more airy.
Yeah.
But it's laminated with a thermal barrier in it, so it's quite heavy.
Right.
So I would hate to force 4.5 kilos on anybody.
I would tick that box because it just gives you access and visibility.
I must admit it is much better. Yeah.
Really nice how it works. So just the lower portion of the door opening.
Ticket window again, like the F1.
Yeah. And of course the famous snorkel.
Yes, the ram induction.
Yeah.
One of the things I hated about the F1, and every time I see it, I think, God, why did I do that? Is the spine is about 50 mil too wide, 2 inches too wide for the width of the car. And we signed the thing off in clay, so it's very difficult to change once you get to tooling block.
Yeah.
So there were a few things on the F1 I just had to leave in the styling, which every time I see one, I think. So this time, with the tools we have, no clay at all, everything is done digitally, and you can get an idea of highlights really early on. So within 2 months of my first styling sketches, I could see highlights and get more shape in. I wanted more shape across the front bonnet with the F1. It was a bit flat. The rear deck was completely flat. This one I wanted more muscle.
This haunches here.
Yeah, this shape, this pool of light in here. And of course, with the modern tools, we've got virtual reality now. And once you get to the final surfacing, it's wow, you can see the finished car. So I can honestly put my hand in my heart and say, styling-wise, there's nothing on this I don't like.
I'll ask you that in 10 years' time. Let's see if it actually goes the way through. But yeah, I do like the sharpness of the eye that comes. There is a line all the way down the body, isn't there? That's,
yes, that little crease.
Really nice.
Yeah.
And then the infamous feature here at the rear, the fan, which we've not seen on a road car. I don't think this is.
Yes, the F1 had 2.
So did it? Did it have?
It had the same ground effect. But in a tiny area. If you look on page 84 in Driving Ambition, it explains how they work. This looks more like the Brabham because the fan was too big to package under the engine cover. So we decided quite early on, well, if you can't put it there, it's going to have to be here, and it harps back to the Brabham, but it's nothing to do. The Brabham was a crude device. It was a vacuum cleaner, basically. This is much more sophisticated. What the F1 did was I had 2 reflex diffusers, very steep, that the air would not normally follow, but only about so wide. And it had 240 mil fans sucking the air out of those. And when you switched them on, we got 5% more downforce and 2% reduction in drag. But we had so little time in the wind tunnel because it was the Formula One tunnel we were borrowing effectively.
Yeah.
I logged it in the memory, and I thought if ever I do another supercar, I'd like to do that over the whole floor of the car, the diffuser floor.
Right.
And that's what we've done. So the reason why it has to be so big is it has to remove all the dirty air, all the boundary layer. It aggressively makes the air follow a very steep diffuser. So normally diffusers are very shallow, and so the air doesn't stall.
I see. Right.
Our diffusers, our diffuser's more sort of this shape.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got the fan on, this bit stalls, and the air just has a gentle amount of downforce like any other supercar. Switch the fan on, and the air follows that, sticks to it, and it makes the venturi, which is ahead of the diffuser and around the center of gravity of the car around here, makes much more downforce.
So this is where it's sucking in. If I was
it sucks in back here,
but
it speeds the air up ahead of it.
Right.
By having a more aggressive diffuser. So the downforce we generate is around the middle of the center of gravity, which is why we don't need any stuff on the front.
Good Lord, because that just moves that far forward, right. So if you had a wing on the back, that's only acting the wrong side of the wheels, while this one is acting within the middle of the car.
Exactly.
Well,
and it's allowed us to keep the car really clean, but generate serious downforce. A heat sink on the back.
Oh, okay, so an intake there for these guys.
Yeah, and it exhausts into the wheel arch.
It's extraordinary because you can do everything with the one light, I presume. Change colours, you can do the indicators, reds.
Yeah, well, that's the indicator, the brake light, the daylight running light, and the tail light. Nothing I hate more than these melted fruit, just because people can.
Yeah.
You know, they have indicators that are alive and move, and they have all sorts of droopy shapes, which in 5 years' time are going to look awful. With a car like this, just needs to be functional. It needs to be pretty. But it needs to look functional, so they were never going to be anything but round. The exhausts were never going to be anything but round. You know.
No sports exhaust option as well. That's one of my bugbears. You know, it's just bad. So I've seen concern that you're saying you're not going to get stuff fired at you if you're travelling convoy
because we draw the air off at 90 degrees to the airflow. The fan car literally had peripheral skirts, and you suck it to the ground. It was crude. It was a blunt instrument, really. That just picked up anything. But actually, funnily enough, it didn't actually throw much out the back. Andretti was told by Chapman, which he later admitted, to try and get the car banned, that it was throwing stones.
Right.
The fan efflux was only 55 miles an hour, so it couldn't throw anything.
Right.
So this we suck the air off at 90 degrees, and we suck it through a filter. So
it's gone through a filter as well?
Yeah, so nothing comes out.
So you're not going to get a sort of rooster spray when it's raining?
We actually had one buyer so far who said he was so disappointed. He said, "Can I have something coming out of the back?"
A water injection, as you used to do on radiators, we'd have it coming out here. 2 little wings here.
Yeah, little
spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah. So they have, the interesting thing about the fan, it's not just an active, fan. It interacts. It's active for sure, but it interacts with the bottom and the top surface of the car, depending on what mode the car is. And we've got 6 modes.
Yeah.
So there's 6 sort of presets, if you like. And then outside that, there's different speed parameters where things will not work below or over, just from a safety point of view. But in combination with the underside and the top side, we can get more downforce as quickly as we like and at lower speeds, or we can dump downforce. So the most cool mode, I think, is streamlined. So, your downforce and your drag are going up the square of the speed. You're going across Germany at 150 miles an hour. You've got much too much downforce, and you're using up valuable suspension movement.
Right.
So if you go into streamline mode, these go down 10 degrees to reduce the base suction turbulence behind the car and the drag. We shut the valves to the diffuser and stall those, so they only make 1/3 of their normal downforce, or half their normal downforce, I think it is. And then we pull the air from the top surface, clean all this up, and reduce drag. The fan goes up to maximum, and we make a virtual long tail with the fan efflux. So this base suction behind here is very turbulent air. And you imagine the amount of air is coming out of here at 7,000 revs, you know. So we create like a virtual long tail car. And we reduce the drag by 12, our target was 8%. We reduced the overall drag by 12.5%. And we don't keep the downforce building up. So the car's settled on its springs, less fuel, you know, better fuel consumption, quieter, calmer.
What's the kilowatt rating or horsepower rating of that?
It's about 8.5 kilowatts.
Yeah. So you're gaining more than 8.5 kilowatts by having that running from the amount of engine horsepower you're using.
Massively, yeah.
So
and also produces, finally, it produces 15 kilos of thrust.
Right.
Which in drag terms is not insignificant.
Isn't it?
I think it's about 2.5% or something in drag.
So if I start the car up, is everybody going to have this enormous sound?
No. In auto mode, unless the driver wants something, or unless you do an emergency brake, the fan doesn't even run. The car is just a passive ground effect car like a McLaren or Ferrari or anything else. So the fan is, these are static. Yeah. The fan is static, and we semi-stall the diffuser, and you get a regular amount of downforce, a normal amount of downforce.
So when's that going to start spinning?
The only automatic time it starts spinning is if you brake really hard at a high enough speed, and then it goes into brake boost mode.
I see.
These pop up to 45. That spools up to maximum, 7 grand, and we open the valves to the diffuser, and we double the downforce. I think the F1 we got 30% more or something under braking. We double the downforce, and from 150 miles an hour, that's 10 meters off the braking diffuser.
Is it really? Why haven't other people used the fan before?
It's very complicated. I mean, and first of all, I don't think many people knew it was on the F1, because the F1 had so many firsts. If you think about it, first carbon car, first active aero, first central driving position, whatever, you know, that it got overlooked. It was in the publicity blurb. It's in the book.
I can't believe. Why haven't I read page 84? I can't believe I stopped at 83 and went straight to 85.
So I don't think anybody knew really. Having
amazing.
said that, having lived through the aerodynamic program and the packaging program and the fan design program, it's not something that's going to catch on, because it's highly complex. You know? Right.
But it's a key to this car, isn't it? It's
I wanted it basically to keep the car clean, you know, and smooth. We would have had to have big splitters sticking out the front, and more scoops, and probably something on the back resembling a flick up or a wing or something.
So I've bought this car, and I've got my friends coming around. How do I show them this amazing engine?
Well, on the production car, this whole back end from the B pillar to there opens as a gull wing. And that's
Mangusta style.
Yeah, just like I nicked it from the Mangusta.
I love that.
And the drama,
detail.
You know, apart from anything else, you can see through, with the door open, you can see through nearly 3/4 of the car. You know. I did it for two reasons. The practical one was the F1 loading the luggage was really bad. You know, because the bottom hinged against your legs.
It's the other reason I didn't buy one.
And you had to squeeze the suitcases up, and you couldn't use this top bit of this. The luggage is bigger than the F1, and it top loads.
And so these will flip up, and you'll literally be able to just put a bag in like that.
Both doors and both engine covers open independently on the key. So if you're coming towards the car and all you want to do is put a suitcase in, you don't want to drive off yet, you can just open left or right hand, pop it in. But the other reason was everything on this car, even more than the F1, is an engineering work of art. I mean, literally everything, I promise you. Stuff that owners will never see, every single bit. And the engine itself is a piece of jewelry. So the other reason is you want to show your friends, don't you? You want to show,
this is mechanical
art. You open this, there's no carbon covers. There's no plastic covers. What you see is what you get. So you've got the engine, the gearbox, the rear suspension, some of the fan ducting, all on display.
And we'll get to the engine in a moment, I think. Did you any sort of benchmarking of this car? Because but you did on the F1, wouldn't you? Because I remember you telling me how rubbish.
Yeah, but I benchmarked. So you remember, if you read the stuff, contemporary stuff, I benchmarked to exercise things I didn't want. So
Yes,
I drove
you did that list.
the current
Yeah.
cars, which was an EB110, 220 Jaguar,
Yeah.
F40, 959 Porsche. I think those were all the supercars. I had driven the older ones like the Countach and
Yeah.
Testarossa, older ones too, but those are the ones, and I just wrote down all the things I hated,
Yeah.
like visibility, turbo lag, pedal offsets, and just, like, if you want to do the ultimate driver's car, it can't have any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, lack of luggage, you know,
Yeah.
rubbish sound system or whatever it was.
So you sort of saying that the current supercar crop are just off down a blind alley? They're going the
No,
wrong
I
from
mean, I've driven them all, and just about every single one is more competent than the F1. I mean,
Yeah.
on the track, on the road. I mean, they're miles ahead now, absolutely miles ahead. And I mean, some of them, honestly, around Goodwood, which is a quick circuit, you can't believe the speed you can lap safely, you know.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when you get out, you think, well, almost anybody could have done that. Not just
Right.
me. You put your mother
Yeah.
in that, and they'll probably do a lap time a couple of seconds slower, sort of thing. And none of them gave me, or do give me, the instantaneous buzz when you hit the throttle. None of them. Doesn't matter how many turbos and batteries and motors they've got. None of them make a nice noise.
Yeah.
But much more importantly, the two things I think I score a sports car on is when you get out of it, walking away, you really want to have another look. That's the first thing. And then within an hour, you really want to get back in again, you know.
Yeah.
And I've done so many miles in an F1, and every time I get back in the F1, just dropping into the seat,
Yeah. It's an event.
it's not, I mean, the obvious things are central driving position, V12, lightweight, but it's much more than that, the F1 experience. It's to do with the way you feel with the controls, the primary and secondary controls, where the gear lever is, where the pedals are, the visibility with the low scuttle. It's all those things that you probably think about subconsciously, but you wouldn't write down, you know. And the other cars don't have that.
No. Well, I think at that point we ought to break off, open the doors, and get inside.
Sure. You know, we've tried. I have a fantastic team of people working with me. The best team. I think they're the best team I've ever worked with. You know, and
quite a few did the F1 as well, haven't they? They've been with you
yes,
some time.
they have. They have. Yeah, I've got quite a few people like Kev Richards, my creative director, been with me more than 25 years.
Yeah.
We're perfectly placed to do, after 30 years, to do another ultimate driver's car because we know the things that make that experience inside and out good, and the things that didn't quite work that well or weren't good enough. So this time we've really focused, and I got that across to the team at a very early stage, and everybody's been fantastic at weight, obviously, but not just weight, quality. You know, these switches now have got zero shaft movement, whereas the on the F1 there was always a little bit of movement. Nothing as bad as a production car, but always annoyed me. And now we found a fantastic switch company. We've got the analog rev counter again.
I saw, yeah.
And that's going to be floodlit, aluminium machine needle again, everything hand, you know, all nicely engraved and
with extraordinary numbers on it.
yes, yes.
Normally motorbike
Yes,
only.
13 grand,
like
yes.
that.
My other pet hates are, and God knows where they came from, but fat steering wheels.
God, I've
You know,
just had a go at those.
who invented fat steering
This
wheels?
don't
you know?
work. They just don't work.
I've got an Alpine A110 for my everyday car, which is a lovely little car.
Yeah.
I can't get I've got big hands. I can't get my hands around the grip.
Yeah.
You know. So once again, this time it's a carbon fibre wheel.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit less inertia than the F1, and it's a tiny grip again.
Yeah.
And the anti-slip bumps are behind the wheel where they need to be, not sticking out here so they get in the way.
Odd. Yeah.
The minimum amount of controls, and actually this time I've gone one step beyond the F1, where the F1 still had column stalks, where you still had to you had to let go with one hand or stretch your hand. Whereas this time, everything on here is fingers. So we've got horn and headlamp flash again with this finger.
Which people will think were paddle shifts or something, won't they?
We've got indicators left and right here.
You have put them on the wheel. That's brave. But
Because I didn't want stalks.
Right.
I didn't want you to
compromise.
I didn't want anything on the wheel where you had to let go of your grip, basically. So those are indicators. These little scrollers, push to select, that one controls the right screen and that one controls the left screen. No touch screen anywhere. Absolutely hate them.
Yeah. Sat nav?
It's got everything you need, but it all works off your phone.
Oh, right.
So you'll never need to
Apple Pay.
upgrade. Yeah, right. Whatever phone you've got, it works.
Right.
Wirelessly, of course. Yeah. So that's this screen here, and everything is selectable with this knob here. So anything you would expect in a modern car, you know, whether it's sat nav or radio or music or whatever you got on your phone, basically, you can have on that screen. And of course, it gets automatically updated. This screen is engine information, car information, and aero information. So when you select one of the 4 modes on aero, on this knob here, it tells you what you're doing. One of the cameras, the left-hand camera, doubles as a pitot tube, and that measures static pressure, like I had on the Brabham fan car.
Yeah.
And the other end of the transducer is underneath the area where you get the suction. And so when you select a mode here on aero, this screen will pop up with how much suction you've just dialed in.
Actually have the numbers. And the other bit, again, the technology we'll obviously get when we go to see it, but it's the storage space again. Well, I love the pools. You've got little storage areas.
Yes, there's glove boxes left and right here.
Yeah.
They're actually, those are more than 5 litres a side. So if you add up these 2 glove boxes.
We've got 2 under the seats here.
Well.
Yeah.
Those 2 and the one in the middle for the for the passengers for phones and sunglasses.
Yeah.
It's just short of 30 litres,
really,
which is better than some saloon cars.
Yeah. And the most exquisite pedals I've seen this side of a.
Yes, we didn't. I didn't think we're going to get them lighter than the F1, but we've actually got 300 grams out of them. The throttle pedal's titanium again. And then the gear lever, I had a few owners later in life, 10 years on, saw the gear mechanism, which I designed myself for the F1, out on the bench, and everything's titanium and aluminium and a little work of art. And they said, well, why did you bury that in a box? You know, it's beautiful. Some people wanted to buy them for their desks.
Right.
So this time I've got this cantilevered hybrid of carbon and aluminium, a sort of switch gear lever pack sticking out, and I've hung the mechanism out the bottom so you can actually see the titanium bits. You know. And this is, I just went for, with the F1 in those days in the 90s, everybody liked the chunky look, so the gear lever on the F1 looks chunky, but it's all hollowed out aluminium, it doesn't weigh much. This time I haven't bothered with anything that's fashion. So, you know, a gear stick is a gear stick. So that's a bit of 9mm titanium, full stop, and a knob on the top.
The one thing I remember from the F1 was how close the gate was.
9 degrees.
It's 9 degrees, is it?
Same as this.
And this is the same, is it? So you're just conscious, but you think this is going to be...
We're going to be able to get the gear change feel much better than the F1, because on the F1, adjusting it, sitting in a rig in Pete Wiseman's shop in California, on the rig, every time I wanted an adjustment, we had to take the back off the box and change stuff. X-Track have done a fantastic job with, on the prototype boxes, having external detent and force adjusters. So we've already got a rig that we're going to be sitting in until we've got it perfect. The other big difference about this cockpit is we've made it bigger than the F1 and airier than the F1. So we've given the passengers a little bit more width, 15mm aside. We've got 25mm more legroom, and we've lost these beams, so the whole thing is flat floor, and then in addition we've got the glazed roof. So it just feels like, it is a bigger cockpit, but it feels bigger as well. I
would desperately like to jump in there, but coronavirus prevents me from sitting in there because of spacing. But the accents of the orange, I'm guessing that's the show car look, but it does set it off beautifully.
Yeah, well, that's our heritage colour from my first racing car.
So the orange is, that's sort of what you'll get unless you spec otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, but to be really honest, these cars are so handmade, and there's only 100 of them. Within reason, we can do anything an owner wants, you know.
Right.
For me, honestly, more than half the fun. I love designing the cars, obviously, but I love meeting the owners and making them part of the journey, sharing it with them, and making sure by the time they get the car delivered, they understand why everything is why it is, you know, so that they can just enjoy the experience.
The whole package.
So we can do, as I say, within reason, we're going to start engaging with people a year before production, the end of this year, and we can do virtually anything.
And they're going to be assembled where we are, is it?
Indeed, this is, we built this from scratch in 2017, and we start kitting it out next May.
Wow.
Also, the pre-production vehicles get built here in October next year.
Brilliant. Let's go and have a look at the engine then.
We showed an owner a very early sort of drawing of the engine over a Zoom session, and the owner said, "Can I buy a spare engine?" He said, "No, you don't have to worry about that. We'll keep them in stock." You know. He said, "No. I want to buy the car, but I also want to buy an engine."
Well, the things that struck me when I first saw this, one, the exhaust is heading upwards rather than down, and two, just the compactness of it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is categorically the best V12 made in the history of the motor car, and probably, now knowing what it costs to make one, will remain the best V12 as we head towards hybrids and electric cars. The reason why the primary pipes sweep up so high is because we have these massive diffusers.
Oh, underneath the
So generally, you have a very soft diffuser starting the rear bulkheads about here, sweeping up, and the pipes can go down and round. But our diffuser just goes straight up.
I almost don't know where to start with this one, but the driver, you wanted to make this ultimate driving car. Why is the V12 necessary? Was it a V10, V6? It had to be 12.
It was never, I wouldn't have done the program if it hadn't been NA or a V12. Because I think that's the ultimate. I think less cylinders is too common and too rough, and hasn't got the character that a 12 has. More cylinders is showing off.
Right.
Honestly, you know, we don't need more than 12. A V12, 60, 65 degrees, this is 65. There's perfect primary balance and perfect secondary balance. So you don't need a lot of rubber in the engine, so you don't get all the rock and shunt and things you get with a V8. You've got to mount a V8 quite softly, especially a flat plane crank, quite softly to take the buzz out of everything. On this, you can keep the powertrain, and this is semi-structural like the F1. It's important we keep the powertrain well contained.
I thought with your obsession of weight, then that was, but this is where the enjoyment comes. You could have made a V6 lighter and the same sort of thing, but it just wouldn't be.
No, it
what
wouldn't
you
be.
wanted.
I mean, the only mission in life this car has is to be the absolute ultimate driving experience that anybody's ever had since the car was invented.
Yeah.
And it had to be a V12, you know. But I didn't want a big capacity.
No.
I love the Colombo V12 from the 60s, which was a 3-litre in the 250s, all the 250 Ferraris. I just love that little engine, the way it delivers the torque and the power and the sound of it. And I romantically wanted a 3.3-litre V12, but we calculated to have more push than the F1, we would have needed the car to be under 900 kilos. That was never going to happen.
So we'll rewind back. One of the drivers of this, it had to be slightly quicker or more powerful than the F1. Was that?
I wanted it to be a better experience than the F1, and I'm not talking numbers. I don't care. I have no idea what the 0 to 60, 0 to 100.
I've looked everywhere. Every press release, no mention of performance, no top speed.
I don't care. No. It's got to be. Go down in history as the best engineered car and the best driving experience, full stop.
Right.
And, you know, people ask me with the F1, you know, why aren't you publishing 0 to 60? Why aren't you, you know, telling us what top speed it'll do? I said to them, it's 1,100 kilos, it's got 600 horsepower, it's going to be fast, you know? And this has a better power to weight ratio than a LaFerrari, a McLaren P1, a McLaren P1 GTR, and a 918 Porsche. So it's not going to feel slow, but it's all about that initial kick, and that is the torque of the engine rather than the power. It's power a little bit as well, and the weight of the car, and the way the engine picks up speed.
And that's the bit I'm going to tackle you on, because this at the moment, maximum torque, 467 newton meters at 9,000 RPM.
Yeah.
You qualified 71% available at 2,500 RPM as well, isn't it?
That's ridiculous.
It's just,
You know,
yeah.
I embarrassed myself dramatically at the end of last year, and I've never felt more embarrassed because I'm an engine guy. I
Yeah.
started designing engines and gearboxes
Right.
before I designed cars. I studied engine design. I've always been an engine person. And when going back now, 18, 20 months, talking with Cosworth about the capacity and the layout and how much I wanted to hide all the pipes and the weight targets and all the other hard time I gave them. I said, one thing I do want is I want 2 engine modes, please. So on a little switch with electronic management now you can do it.
Yeah.
You do 2 maps basically.
Yes.
We'll have the show-off mode where you say to your friend, you want to hit 12,100 revs, and that's your standard mode.
Yeah.
But then you have a sort of a cruise mode or whatever, and you click it down and you've reset the torque much lower down, going to the shops, picking up the kids at school, that sort of stuff, running out at Ferrari revs, sort of 995. I don't care what horsepower it makes. And they said, you won't need that. And I said, no, you're not listening. I want that, because when I grew up, I didn't say this to them, but when I grew up in the 60s, you had power or torque.
Yeah.
That was
all
it.
the cams,
There was-
wasn't it? Whether you had a wild cam
exactly,
or a...
exactly. Compression ratio, cams,
Yeah.
whatever, So they said, you won't need it. So I said, I want it. So we got it. And then at the end of last year, they showed me the final signed off torque and power curve for the top end one, and it made 71% of the torque at 2.5.
Yeah.
I felt so embarrassed, I don't know how much torque this is going to make in the first mode, so probably even more.
So we got 2 modes. We did end,
Yes,
which
have
we
got
have,
2
but you
modes.
almost didn't
We have,
need it.
yeah.
Again, from your experience, how close is this to the generation of F1 V12s in your McLaren day type of thing?
It's probably better, actually, I think.
Does it rev higher? They rev, I don't know what they
I
used to
can't
rev.
remember.
I can't.
Well, they were on valve springs. The limit with revs for a given capacity.
'Cause that's when it went to pneumatic valves.
Is valve springs,
Yeah.
So whatever they rev to on valve springs. But of course, they were rebuilding the engine probably every race, So this thing has got to do all the testing on the dyno like any other road car engine. This is not one of these things you're going to have to rebuild every 10,000 miles.
So how do you do a durability,
Yeah, I mean, their
target?
durability program, I've seen it written out, and it's pretty heavy,
Yeah,
It's got to be reliable as well.
50,000 miles, 100,000?
It's guaranteed for 50,000 miles,
Oh, is
so it
it?
should do over 100,000 easily.
Oh, right.
Maybe
Oh, so that's-
150, something like that.
And what's the highest mileage F1? So
60 something thousand.
So you're all right at
Oh,
100,000.
you're well in.
Yeah.
If you kept it for a lifetime, you'll be well in. Yeah.
And then I don't quite recognise what's going on. This is the clever box of tricks, isn't it?
Yeah.
But please explain.
This is an
what is
ISG, which is an integrated starter generator. That was Cosworth's idea, because I hate belt-driven stuff. You spend all this time designing a pure little 60s-looking engine with no pipes and stuff, and then you hang a compressor off it, a starter motor, an alternator or 2. They said we might even need 3 alternators because of the revs. And suddenly you clustered all this stuff around it, and then you've got the reliability factor of the belts, adjusting, and so they suggested that. So this is magic. It saves nearly 20 kilos on the car because it is the starter motor, and they need a very high start revs for starting because of the emissions, I think. It's the alternator.
Okay.
It makes 48 volts to drive the fan motor, which saves about 6 kilos on the fan motor. It drives the 48 volt compressor for the aircon at the front of the car. And it means we have nothing belt driven on the engine, which is magic. I mean, I can't remember the last road car engine I saw without belts.
That is what this looks like. That's why it just looks like a race unit, doesn't it? Because it hasn't got those ancillaries that you expect to see. So does that mean you need a 48 volt battery, or can you just have a...
Yeah, so we've designed our own pack, which is 12 volt battery, 48 volt battery, cooling system for the 48 volt battery, inverter and charger is 12 kilos, which is less than one lead acid battery.
And that's in the nose,
That's in the
unexpected.
nose,
And the other thing was also dry sumped, and this is a scavenged pump down here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other
it.
thing.
It's just
One of the
insane.
problems you have with mid-rear engine cars, and I'm sure you've experienced it, I certainly have, is that you have, when you're designing a car, you have something called a centroid, which is, if you imagine the car as a loaf of sliced bread, every slice has a centre of gravity. Yeah. And the dots go up and down a bit, but generally you can join them. You take a mean line through them, and it slopes heavily upwards at the rear.
Yes.
And if you want a balanced car, you have to slope the roll axis in sympathy with that. But you can't go too high on the roll axis at the rear, because then you'll get jacking, which is horrible stuff. So on all rear mid-engine cars, the height of the weight of the engine and the height of the centre of gravity of the engine is really important. And in transient handling, so that is chicane, Goodwood chicane, let's say, or chicane on the road, left and right. What you feel is, if you go in quite quickly, you can feel the back end of the car wanting to roll out. It's not a sliding thing, it wants to overtake you. Yeah. And on the big V12 cars like the Lamborghinis, it's quite prevalent. Yeah. On the F1, I have to say, right on the limit, you can feel it. Yeah. You can just feel it. And that engine was 40, 50 kilos lighter than all the other V12s when it came out. Yeah. This is 65 kilos lighter again. Yeah. But the important thing is, the F1 had a crank height of 125, which in those days was unheard of. Other cars were 160, 170 with a dry sump. This is 85 mil.
And the stroke is 63 or something, so that's only about
but
that
that's
much.
Cosworth, you see. They invented windage scavenging on the DFE back in the 60s. And that's what this does. They actually, they just almost skim the bottom of the sump with the crank weights. And the windage pulls the oil out and into the ports for the scavenge pumps.
That's what I was
but
amazed.
85 millers, you know, I would have been happy with 100, to be honest. So this has a very low centroid, so the transient handling is going to be night and day compared with the F1.
And I guess it's hardly got a flywheel because of that.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's got a very low inertia clutch. Yeah. But a fit-for-life clutch this time that doesn't need adjusting.
Really? Yeah. All right. Another good reason to buy one of these, not an F1. Yeah. And then your flare of revs, which almost doesn't compute in the head, this
28,400 revs a second. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, again, Cosworth were quite rightly, a little bit smug, because I said we have to be quicker than the F1, because the owners love in neutral just touching the throttle. And also when you get a gear change right, it's beautiful. Yeah. And they came back February last year and said, I think we've beaten your target. How does 28,400 sound? That's like, okay. Yeah. But as an engineer, doesn't compute.
No, it doesn't. Well, an F1 was quick at, what was that?
I think it was around 10,000.
10. Yeah, I mean, that's just off
from
the
memory,
scale,
it was around 10, I think. Yeah.
So again,
and of course, turbos are like watching paint dry.
Yeah, not on this. And then the final bit, the manual gearbox. You have to convince me on this bit, but
well, I wasn't going to do it up until last autumn 2018. It wasn't going to have a manual. I was going to do a halfway house. Yeah. The one thing I was never going to have was a DCT. As much as they're convenient, they're a complete non-event. You know, I use one every day, and actually, to be really blunt, I leave it in automatic because pushing a switch and not feeling a gear change is pointless to me. It was never going to be a DCT, so I thought, okay, we'll go halfway house. We'll do a sequential manual.
Oh, okay.
So you need the clutch to move off. Yeah. But then you've still got to do something, and you actually are physically still changing gear. Okay. And there were issues with that, but it looks like we could perhaps do one. Extract had their doubts. And then the people that paid attention in November 2017 when we announced we were going to do a car were lobbying me to say, if you're only going to do 100 cars, please do an H-pattern manual. And of course that was music to my ears because it's lighter. It's a much more satisfying change when you get it right. You know, you get the feel right, I mean, of the mechanism. And it's the lightest gearbox you can do by a long way. So that's what we did. And we've only had, we've pre-sold more than 2/3 of the cars so far. We've only had one person ask for a paddle shift.
The bit that gets me, if you've got such a flare of revs, it also is going to go down at the same speed.
Oh yes, the decay is going to be instantaneous.
So how are you going to get that other gear in?
Oh, well, these days that's easy. With the electronics, you do rev matching.
Oh, so the engine will rev match to your gear change?
Cosworth and Extract work with us on how quickly we want the thing to feel, change your gear, and they'll rev match.
Will it blip on the way down as you move the gear around?
Probably, yeah, because the decay is going to be so fast. You know.
That you just can't touch the throttle, even a heel and toe, and it will flare and then you've missed it.
I think we've got a lot of development work to do to make it I don't want to kill the gear change, but I just want to help the driver.
Right.
So we'll develop that to be an event. You know.
So what happens next? This has been fantastic to go through the details, and we've got to sort of wrap up, but when do you drive the first mule?
Well, it's getting more and more exciting. This is on the dyno at the moment.
Yeah.
We get our first engine delivered on Friday.
Right, this week.
This week.
Right.
And that goes into George, who's our mule. And that gets driven mid-August, I think.
Right. George, you say?
George, yeah. So we had Edward and Albert for the F1.
Yes, I remember.
This one's George. And I certainly driven before the end of August.
Wow.
And then September, we start assembling, the monocoque's finished, we start assembling XP1, XP2, and we drive the first 2 real cars in October.
Wow.
And then we've got 15 months of vehicle development, 13 prototypes this time.
No, is that what you need now?
Yeah. I had to get by with 4. We built 5 with the F1, but we destroyed one immediately with the BMW testing in Namibia. So I had 4 cars to develop the F1. 13. Now we need 13.
13.
Yeah. So
I'm available if you need, the extra driver with 13. I'll happily join the team. It's been absolutely brilliant, Gordon, go round. I'm amazed. I'm so pleased you're doing it again, because it's been talked about in back of fag packets for a number of years. And just the purity that gets me on it, that is absolutely driven from a driver point of view. There's no marketing, there's no nothing. This is it. And it's everything we've learnt. This is T50, you're 50 years doing it. Yeah. So from this initial show of it and what I've seen, it just shouts what you love about your cars and look at your car collection.
That's very kind of you, because that's exactly what it's meant to do. Driving perfection, full stop. Yeah.
Been brilliant. Thank you very much. So there you go. But I hope you enjoyed this slightly different Harry's Garage video. If you did, well, keep watching, keep subscribing. More videos coming on very soon.